My mom texted me the night before my housewarming. Asterisk will skip it. Your sister just moved too, asterisk no call, no apology, just those words glowing on a bright screen in a dark room. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then smiled to myself, blew out the candles I had lit for them, and locked the door to a dinner that would go on without them. A week later, while cameras drifted through my new coastal villa for a home design show, that same phone would not stop buzzing. Missed calls stacked one after another. And that broadcast, that quiet little episode on national TV, was only the first wave. Before I tell you what came next, answer this to yourself for a second. Have you ever been quietly erased inside your own family, like you were always in the room but never really there? When I was 8, Christmas morning always began with the click of my mother's heels on cold tile and the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting from the kitchen. Sophie, my younger sister, would already be sitting in front of the tree, ribbons tangled in her curls, smiling like the sun chose her first every single year. Open yours, sweetheart, Mom would say, handing Sophie a big box wrapped in metallic gold paper. I waited for mine, the smaller package off to the side. Inside, it was always something practical. Plain socks, a planner, cheap pens. You like writing things down, Mom would remind me, as if predictability was a personality trait I should be grateful for. When I was 10, Sophie danced on stage at the spring recital. White dress, pink bows, glitter on her cheeks. The crowd clapped like she had invented happiness. Dad lifted her in the air after and said, "That's my girl," loud enough for everyone to hear. A week later, I came home with a blue ribbon from the district science fair, for a solar car I had built out of scrap wood and foil. I held the ribbon out toward him, waiting for the same light in his eyes. "That's nice," he said. "Just don't stay up so late next time. You need sleep." Then he turned back toward the television. By 12, I had learned something simple. Silence was safer than hope. When Sophie joined cheerleading, there were balloons, pizza nights, and brand new shoes. For her first season. When I passed the entrance exam for the state engineering program, Mom just said, "That's great, Maddie. Remember to help Sophie with her English project later." It was never open cruelty. It was absence, small and steady, like dust settling on a shelf you walk by every day. I found my place in the old shed behind our house. It smelled like cedar, rust, and old rain. I would sit on the floor, legs crossed, sanding old boards until my arms ached and my fingers burned. One summer afternoon, I built a small table. The legs were uneven, the edges rough, but it stood on its own. I ran my hand across the wood and thought, "This is mine." It was the first thing in my life no one else could take credit for. That table followed me everywhere after that. When I left for college on a scholarship, I left the framed family photos on the wall behind, but I took that table. I refinished it, carried it up 3 flights of dorm stairs, and turned it into my desk, my drafting space, the foundation for every design I ever sketched. Mom liked to say Sophie was the heart of the family. Maybe she was. But I was the structure. The beams no one noticed until they were gone. That was the year I stopped asking for recognition and started building it. The text came on a Thursday afternoon while I was finalizing delivery notes for the villa. Outside, the ocean was restless. The sky split itself between silver and blue. My phone buzzed once against the stone counter. Asterisk will skip your housewarming. Your sister just moved too, asterisk no greeting, no, we're proud of you, no punctuation. Just that. I stared at the message long enough that the reflection of the words blurred across the window glass. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then I typed 2 words. "That's okay." I hit send, turned the screen off, and slid the phone into a drawer beside a folder labeled Guest List. The kitchen was quiet except for the distant sound of waves. I could still smell cedar oil and paint from the beams overhead, remnants of everything I had built alone. Across the room, the long dining table I had designed for the evening caught the late light, its surface polished and long, stretching toward the sea. 15 chairs, equal distance apart. No chair at the head. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. It was not pain that begged for sympathy. It was something slower, heavier, the kind of feeling that decides it is done waiting. I walked to the glass wall and brushed my fingers along the cold surface. My reflection hovered over the horizon, small, clear, steady. I was not angry. I was awake. That night I did not sleep. I stayed in the great room with the windows cracked open, the Pacific wind pushing through the cedar beams. Every sound, waves, hinges, the stretch of old wood, felt like instructions. If my family could erase me with a single message, then I would rewrite the space they refused to show up in. Not to prove I mattered to them, but to build what they never built. Belonging. At 2 a.m, I rolled tracing paper across the dining table and drew the blueprint of a single night. Lines, angles, light placements, like I was drafting a new home. At the top of the page, in pencil, I wrote, "Everyone has a seat." By dawn, the page was crowded with notes. Guest names, measurements, lighting, temperature, speaker placement, chair distances. I marked where each seat would go so that no one's back faced the ocean. Equal sight lines, equal warmth. I even traced the path people would walk as they arrived, like a floor plan for being seen. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started sending messages. Short, direct. Dinner this Saturday. My place by the coast. Come hungry. Then I picked up my phone and called the people from the list I had made the night before. Maya, my college friend whose family never once met her at the airport. Jonah, my cousin who had been left out of the last family reunion because the table was full. Aunt Denise, who was always told she talked too loud and ended up eating in the kitchen during holiday meals. At first, their voices held disbelief. "You're hosting?" they asked. "It's time," I said. By noon the villa was alive with movement again. The low hum of delivery vans, the scent of fresh bread and citrus, the sound of workers walking up from the driveway. I moved between rooms with a clipboard in my hand, checking boxes like this was a construction site. Table linens, 15 settings, cream and soft gray. Candles, unscented, same height. Plates, identical. No subtle hierarchy. No hidden signals. At the hardware store in town, I bought twine for hanging bulbs, marine clips, and a roll of waterproof canvas. The clerk asked if I was throwing a party. "Something like that," I said. He smiled and handed me the bag. He had no idea he was passing me the materials for a quiet revolution. Back at the villa, I went task by task. Signed invoices for flowers, organized the kitchen prep list, measured every candle's position along the center line of the table. Every time a knot of old resentment pulled tight in my chest, I set my palm on the edge of the wood and felt the grain under my fingertips, the way I had with that first little cedar table in the shed. It always steadied me. Clara, the local chef, arrived that evening, arms full of crates and herbs. She looked around the room while she unpacked. "What kind of dinner is this?" she asked. I watched the sea fade from blue to steel behind her. "A table for people who stopped being invited," I said. Clara smiled softly, like she understood more than I had said. The next 2 days moved like choreography. Lights strung just low enough to feel warm, not theatrical. Wild flowers from the cliffs arranged in heavy glass jars. Eucalyptus and lavender threaded into small bundles near the doors. I left a simple card at each setting with one line written in ink. "You belong here." Friday evening, while I was checking the glass seams for drafts, the film crew arrived. They had shot the build months ago and wanted one last sequence of the finished space for the home design episode. I said yes without thinking. It felt right. This house had been built in silence. It deserved to be seen that way too. They moved quietly, cameras floating through the golden light. No interviews, just the sound of plates set down, footsteps on stone, and waves outside. I kept working as they filmed. Tightened a fixture, shifted a chair half an inch, wiped a line of dust from the countertop. One of the cameramen glanced at me and whispered to another, "She moves like she built the whole place herself." He was not wrong. By midnight, everything was ready. The great room glowed in soft amber light. The oak table ran parallel with the sea. Linen smooth, silverware lined up like little marks on a blueprint, candles still unlit. I stood at one side of the room and looked at it the way a stranger would. No main seat. No quiet person tucked into a corner. Just chairs waiting. I walked slowly around the table and brushed the back of every seat once. 15 small touches. The same pattern I used when checking beams for stress. Press, check, move on. Outside, waves hit the cliffs hard, like they were rehearsing the soundtrack for what was about to happen. I checked my list one last time. Guests confirmed. Deliveries done. Payments logged. Every detail finished. Inside that villa, there was nothing left for me to prove. The next evening, the first headlights curled up the hill. Through the glass I watched silhouettes step out of cars, coats tucked under arms, hair lifted by the wind. Maya's kids ran ahead toward the door. Aunt Denise held a pie wrapped in a worn dish towel. Jonah stood back for a second, just looking at the house as if he wasn't sure it was okay to walk in. Their laughter carried over the sound of the sea. Inside, I lit the candles one by one. Flames swayed and reflected in the glass until it looked like the horizon itself was lined with small lights. The table waited, wide and even. The scent of roasted salmon, herbs, and lemon filled the air. When the last guest arrived, I closed the door. Conversation started quietly at first, almost cautious, then loosened. I took a seat in the middle of the table, not at the end. There were no speeches, no forced toasts about family, no polite clapping. Just forked tines against plates, small bursts of laughter, questions asked and actually answered. From the terrace, the sea was dark and endless. Inside, the villa pulsed with a calm kind of life. For the first time, the house felt complete. Not because my parents were missing, but because every chair was finally filled by someone who had learned to eat around empty spaces. The episode aired the following week. I had not planned to watch it. But the villa was full again that night. Maya, Jonah, Aunt Denise, and my grandmother, Ruth, all came over. Someone strung a white sheet along the terrace wall and aimed a projector at it. The sea moved in the background like a darker shadow. The opening shot panned up from the cliff, the camera rising toward the house, light spilling out of the glass like liquid gold. When architect Madison Cole designed her oceanfront villa, the narrator said, she wanted a space where every person sat at the same table. Then my own recorded voice played. Calm, unhurried. Fairness is not decoration. It is structure. No one spoke for a moment. The only sound was the wind brushing along the railing. You really said that, Maya whispered. I smiled a little without looking away from the screen. I did. The episode moved between drone shots and close angles. My hands aligning silverware. Sunlight cutting along beams. Clara stirring chowder in the kitchen. The long oak table, candles flickering like soft heartbeats as the camera moved down the length. When the credits rolled, someone started clapping. Then everyone did. I leaned back and breathed in the salt air. For a second, I thought that was the end of it. Then my phone started vibrating on the counter behind me. Once. Again. Again. Non-stop. Mom. Dad. Sophie. Maya saw me glance back. You going to answer? She asked. No, I said. Not yet. By morning, there were more than 30 missed calls and a long row of messages. Asterisk we saw the show. Why didn't you tell us? Asterisk everyone is talking about it. You made us look heartless. Call me back. I did not. Instead, I opened my notebook and checked off the last empty box. Dinner, complete. The table stood empty in the great room, but the wax on the candle stand still smelled faintly of salt and citrus. At noon, my grandmother called. They are going to try to rewrite it, she said. They will tell themselves they were misunderstood. I know. Then do not argue, she told me. Let the truth sit where everyone can see it. It is stronger there. An hour later, my phone rang again. Mom. I answered and set it on speaker. Grandma sat at my counter with her tea. Madison, Mom began in that soft, artificial voice she used when she wanted to sound kind, not guilty. We watched your episode. I think there has been a misunderstanding about what I texted. They edited it to make it sound like we excluded you. That is not what happened. Your sister was moving that weekend, you know how busy things get. I looked out at the water, light rippling along the surface. You excluded me in your own words, I said. I still have the message. Silence. Then the familiar shift. Defense. Explanation. Justification. You are overreacting again, Mom said. We have always supported you. We just did not think you would want to make a big spectacle of a housewarming. You have always been so private. Grandma's voice cut clean through her excuses. Janet, stop, she said. I have watched you do this since she was a kid. You turn the lights away from her and call it balance. Mother, this is not the time. It is the only time, Grandma said. Every Christmas, every birthday, you built the entire house around Sophie's comfort and told yourself it was fair. It was not. Mom's breath stuttered. That is not true, she whispered. It is, Grandma replied. And now everyone has seen what it looks like when your forgotten child builds a table without you. The line went quiet. I could hear my father in the background, grumbling something about drama and attention. I did not respond. I did not need to. The silence between us finally belonged to them. When the call ended, Grandma looked over at me. You did not need to win, she said. You just needed to stop carrying their version of the story. 2 days later, the house was quiet again. The chairs were still pulled close from the dinner. Table linen still held faint creases. The air still smelled like lemon, salt, and wood polish. I walked barefoot across the stone floor. Each step echoed lightly against glass. The sea outside had calmed. Gray, steady, indifferent to human drama. My phone sat on the counter, screen dark. I had not checked it all day. Instead, I opened the terrace doors and let the wind move through the house, lifting the last of the heaviness out of corners it had lived in for years. For so long, I had built spaces for other people to belong in. Offices, homes, restaurants, this villa. Only now did I understand I had been designing my way toward this exact silence. That evening, I invited only 3 people. My parents and Sophie. No crew. No extra guests. No long table with 15 chairs. Just the small cedar table from my childhood shed, the one with the faint scars from when I first sanded it as a girl. I set 4 plates, poured wine, and waited. When they arrived, they looked smaller. The sound of the ocean behind them made their voices softer. Mom ran her hand along the edge of the table. It's beautiful, she whispered. Different than I pictured. It is home, I said. Dinner stayed quiet. The fire crackled. My father complimented the food. Sophie stared at the table for a long time before speaking. I did not realize, she said, voice low, that it hurt that much. I did not know how to say it, I answered. No one apologized. No one begged forgiveness. The silence between us was not a weapon anymore. It was space. Honest, uncomfortable, necessary. Mom exhaled, no performance, no forced lightness. You did good, Mads, she said. You really did. It was not redemption. It was recognition. And for once, that was enough. After they left, I stayed by the fireplace until the embers turned soft and red. The waves outside kept their rhythm, the same one I had listened to during sleepless nights. Only now it did not sound like distance. It sounded like return. I stepped out onto the terrace, the night air cool on my skin. Below, the ocean breathed, slow and endless. I laid my hand on the old cedar table and traced a groove along its edge. For years I waited for someone to pull out a chair for me. In the end, I built the table myself. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is design, structure, control. Walking away is not always losing. Sometimes it is the first step toward living on your own terms. If that moment, when she closed the door and chose peace over permission, stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever set a boundary so sharp it changed everything you accepted about yourself? I read every story you share. It is how this space stays real. And if you want more stories where justice arrives quietly, make sure to subscribe. There is always another calm, calculated revenge waiting just beneath the surface.